So one of the participants asked, will they be on video?
Nope. We only the panelists are on video today.
We also have a question about lunch and who's serving lunch.
That is a great question.
Yeah, it really is.
I heard the vault camps were delivering lunch.
From sunny Florida.
All right, everybody, we'll go ahead and get started. Well, welcome on this beautiful day today. Spring is coming, so thanks for taking the time to join us today. My name is Arlene DeYoung, and I'm on the board of Great Lakes Urban. Just a quick summary of what we do. Great Lake Urban strengthens neighborhoods in the cities of Holland and Grand Rapids and several other regions of West Michigan. We are here today to share stories and insights about the power of community connecting through asset-based community development. A lot of exciting work happening in the communities all around. With that, I'll introduce our moderator and Great Lakes Urban's Executive Director, Eric Smith. Eric joined Great Lakes Urban as an Executive Director in 2020. He has been connecting communities in Uganda, Appalachia, and beyond for more than 2 decades. He brings a wealth of expertise to our team. So thank you, everybody. Over to you, Eric.
Great, thanks a lot, Arlene. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm especially excited because we have 3 panelists with us that are just going to share just important stories that I hope will encourage you and bring a smile to your heart. I want to go over a couple of ground rules as a moderator. One of those is we really want this to be a discussion. It's an informal lunch and learn. One thing that you can do to make this that kind of a positive experience is to, if you go to the top right of your screen, you'll see a box that says view. And then if you click on that, you have some different options. And if you click gallery view, that'll give you an option to see all of us at the same time having this discussion. The second thing I wanted to note is we had, when people were registering for the event, several of you asked great questions, but you still have the opportunity to ask questions. And to do that, just go to the bottom of the screen and you can pull up the Q&A box and drop questions in there. We may get to all the questions and we may not, but be assured that we'll follow up with you and get those questions answered in a follow-up email. Finally, Arlene's already mentioned this, so I just want to reiterate that you might hear the words asset-based community development, or you might hear it as ABCD. And what that is it's a methodology for engaging residents and their dreams and providing the supportive infrastructure of associations and institutions for the sake of revitalization. And this is a bottom-up, middle-out, relationship focused and asset-based and place-based process and a set of principles that really cuts to the heart of who we are as an organization. And if I'm not mistaken, we have here with us today John McKnight joining us. And John really, about 4 decades ago, launched the ABCD movement. And it's become a national and an international movement as well of engaging dreams and strengthening neighborhoods and communities. So we want to thank him for being here with us and for his being a guiding light through the years. But now I want to turn to our panelists. This is exciting for me to be with you all. And we're going to kick off the conversation with having each of you 3 introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the work of Great Lakes Urban. Jay, can I have you start us off? And Jay, if you could unmute yourself. And as you're doing
there we
that,
go.
Amy,
there we go.
John, you may want to do the same.
Yeah.
So we'll have Jay go and then Amy and then Sergeant Weatherwax if you'd be willing to come in at the end.
Very good. Thank you, Eric. For 26 years, I worked for a global non-governmental organization called World Renew. And what they did best was start responding to people in need, that is, particularly the poorest countries of the world. They focused on people in need, but they moved beyond the need to look at how do we move from direct assistance aid to real development. That is, how do we put people back in charge of their own story? How do we help them take responsibility for their journey? You know, here in Ottawa County, there are more than 2,163 nonprofits. We spend more than $1 billion a year meeting needs. What's really missing in that mix is the segue from relief to development. We're good at helping people in their pain. We're not so good at helping them out of their pain. And that's what Great Lakes Urban is really focusing on, and what brings me great joy and satisfaction in being part of this. I also want to say thanks to John McKnight for introducing me to this idea of asset-based community development. What's most important there for me is, instead of looking at needs in a community, we look at what are the gifts, what's already there, and how do we harness what's already there. That's a whole different starting platform, and it puts citizens back at the center of the changes they want to seek.
Great, thank you, Jay. Amy?
Hi, yes, my name is Amy and I live here in the West Core neighborhood in Holland. I, all of my life, have loved getting to know people. I love listening to their stories. I love learning from them, and I love pouring into others. When I was a kid, I literally would go to every house on my block and say, "Hi, my name is Amy, and I live right down the street." And so I got to know all my neighbors that way. I knew everybody on our block beside me and everybody behind me. And I spent a lot of my time knocking on neighbors' doors saying, "Hi, is Angie home?" Or "Can RJ come out to play today?" So it's just been such a great way to get to know people. For me, when I was younger, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a neighborhood that was such a family-friendly oriented neighborhood. And our direct neighbors would send Christmas goodies over every year. So one neighbor would send monkey bread and the other would send homemade cookies. And then we would return the favor by sending empanadas or homemade elephant ears. So it was just a very fun family vibe, and we got to care about each other very much. We got to a point where we would invite each other to, weddings and graduation parties. And I remember my dad cooking on the deck, grilling out, and one of the neighbors just stopping over to say hello and ended up leaving with a plate full of food. So yeah, it was just a great way to grow up, and building relationships in that way has always been such a beautiful journey to me. So from planning fun events to just having deep one-on-one talks and bonding, yeah, it just means so much to me, and it gives me so much fulfillment. So when this position came available, I just knew I had to try to go for it. So
Great, this is the lunch hour, and you just made me very hungry thinking about empanadas. So, Sergeant Weatherwax, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. As stated, my name is Sergeant John Weatherwax. I'm the Community Policing Supervisor here in Holland. My story kind of starts back over 20 years ago in college when I took my first community policing class in Lansing. I realized then that I have a heart for community policing and building relationships within this career choice. And then once I found myself working for the Holland Department of Public Safety, I realized they had a deep interest in community policing and had an established community policing team here. And they have had one here since the mid to early 90s. So I was on about 2 years before I was able to join that team. And a lot of my focus as a community policing officer ended up being in the Holland Heights area, where a neighborhood connector that was started by GLU had already been established there, but was still in its infancy. At that time, I heard about it and I was able to get in touch with them and work through them and really see the growing impact that they were able to have in that community. I was able to work with them, and after about 8 years in community policing, I got out of that area to seek a promotion. I was promoted, and here I am 7 years later, back in community policing, overseeing the team now. So now I'm able to direct my team, which consists of 4 community policing officers and 2 school resource officers, and really help them see the same vision that I saw as a young officer in seeing what GLU and the Neighborhood Connector program here in the city can do and is doing here for the residents.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that overview. I'd like to come back. You had mentioned, Sergeant Weatherwax, the term neighborhood connector. And Amy, I believe that's a role that you now have. And I wonder if you could talk to us about what being a neighborhood connector means, how it's impacted your life, and what a normal day looks like for you.
Yeah, so the day definitely starts off with emails, lots and lots of emails. So, and that, depending on the week, things vary. So it could be maybe a set of Zoom meetings scheduled for the week, which Zooms could take place. Which I'm hoping one day soon we can meet back in person, which will be so amazing. But yeah, so they could be meetings along the lines of board meetings or committee meetings where we are planning on events, hammering out the details for events that are coming up. They could be block connector meetings, just about what's upcoming and how we can best support our block connectors. We also do connector challenges. So we challenge our block connectors each month to reach out to their block in different unique ways. Aside from bi-weekly meetings with the staff member, her name is Leela. She works at New Esther Casa. She's our Casa coordinator. I connect with her on other major events that are coming up in the area, also with events that we host at New Esther Casa or any rentals that come in through New Esther Casa. So we kind of coordinate our schedules around that. But most days I'm connecting with neighbors. It could be neighbors who have got a city citation and need some help on a project to get back into city ordinance. And that could look like building teams, people who would be willing to come out and do yard work for them, or at the moment, we're working on some hoarding projects, and also getting people connected with programs such as the home repair program. In the end, like, these efforts really do matter and make a difference in their life. At the moment, like I said, I'm helping 2 neighbors with some hoarding projects, and mental health definitely plays a huge role in that. And so we take time to really hear their story and really just sit and work through the thought process of this habit. How did they get to this place? What kind of new habits can we start building to fight back and to win this battle of this anxiety that they have when it comes to letting go? And then we also are connecting them with resources to help with further counseling. And so, yeah, we've had some really beautiful stories come out of that. 2 really quick, short ones being one of the ladies felt super isolated, so alone, depressed. And once we started connecting with her and really like sat and heard her story, she felt the love and the care from the community, and it really started bringing her out of her shell. And after a couple times of us going there and meeting with her and working on her project and taking our time and moving at her pace, not making her feel rushed or embarrassed, she started to feel connected and wanted to, get involved more, and asked, like, where can I give back? So that was really, really cool to see. And then the other story was one of our block connectors. Somebody on their block had the city citation. And so I asked this block connector to kind of meet with us and if she would be willing to partner on this project. And she was definitely willing. And she said, I could do anything behind the scenes. I could set up things, I can organize things. But as far as going in and doing the actual cleaning or the project itself, I'm not sure if I really feel comfortable with doing that. And so we totally respect that boundary. And then I asked her if she would be willing to just have a one-on-one meeting together with this lady. And so she was willing to do that. We sat down, and they were old friends, but they kind of lost touch after a while, even though they live across the street from each other. But they kind of lost a little bit of touch. And this conversation definitely rekindled their friendship. And the block connector felt more invested in her story, and definitely you could see the spark that happened during that conversation from the beginning to the end. And by the end of that conversation, she was offering actually to come in. She was like, actually, I think I can spare a couple hours on the weekend, and I can come help you sort through boxes. So yeah, so stuff like that is super encouraging to see when those relationships are being built.
Mhm. Amy, what are a couple of the events you referred to? Can you give an example of one or two of the events you referred to?
Yeah, so we've done a car show. We have had a cleanup day for the neighborhood. And we partnered with various organizations like Goodwill and Habitat for Humanity. We partnered with Macatawa Disposal, and we set up different stations, and neighbors could come and just get rid of stuff or recycle stuff. And then we had a free cycle table where it was open for neighbors who maybe could use something that the other neighbor had no use for anymore. Yeah, and then we have currently we're working on a neighborhood talent show, and then one of our biggest ones we do every year is called our West Fest, and it's a giant neighborhood block party that is not just for one block, but it's for the whole neighborhood, the whole span of 66 blocks. So
I can say that the officer that's assigned to that area, he really enjoyed that this year. I believe he went around, he took one of our police bikes and he went around to all the different stops in the neighborhood. So he really enjoyed that event this year.
yeah, that was a fun one. And it kind of looked different because of COVID, but it was super cool. The people on that committee came up with a new idea of how to do that, where we had 5 different locations that they could stop to with different themes, which was super fun. Yeah. And all of these ideas originate from neighbors. So that's where the energy comes from, and the motivation comes from. I mean, I can throw ideas out there, but really everything that's developed is because neighbors want those things to happen.
Yeah, so Amy, I'm kind of wondering if we could tease this out a little bit. It feels like what I'm hearing is neighborhoods can be the producers of their own better future, right? And so, you've teased out some stories where the neighbors and the neighborhood has addressed some mental health issues, and is just becoming a stronger neighborhood in general. And I want to see if I'm hearing that right. And then, I think something that you brought up is this idea of the block connector. And so even, these stories are being multiplied through several dozen block connectors. And so the neighborhood as a whole, it sounds like, is learning that they can choose and direct their own path forward. Am I hearing this right?
Yeah, definitely. The block connector is kind of the resource person of their block. And so neighbors can know to, if they have any questions or they need connecting to some resources, they can go to the specific neighbor. And that neighbor also comes up with ideas for their block. So it could be a block party. Somebody wanted to do a fashion show. And so it's really cool to see what kind of ideas they come up with for their own specific block.
So Jay, I want to turn to you for a second. It takes, I think, some time and it takes some dedication to build this kind of infrastructure where the neighborhood becomes stronger as people get engaged. And I just wonder if you want to comment or make some observations about how does a neighborhood become stronger and get organized?
Yeah, it doesn't happen by itself. Behind the scenes, so let's just take Amy's story, for example. She knew that there was something called West Core, but she had no orientation to asset-based community development. And so part of this thing starts with an organization that owns an ABCD kind of framework for improving or strengthening communities. So I'm actually on the board of West Core Neighbors, and we support Amy as our connector. And we make sure that she gets paid, and we make sure that she gets the training she needs and the support that she needs to function best as a neighborhood connector. And that is the same in every single one of the 4 going on 5 neighborhoods that we're working in here now in the Holland area. There's a little board or an organization that stands behind the connector and supports them. And at the city level, we're forming a team of the connectors so that they, on a quarterly basis, strengthen each other and share stories and support each other. And the city team is going to be working to add additional neighborhoods over the next several months and years. Maybe 1 or 2 per year, additional neighborhoods will be coming on board. So there is a multi-layered system behind the kind of stories that Amy's been telling. And that takes a certain amount of coordination and support.
I wonder if you could share, I know you've been at this a long time, and just wanted to share from your experience what the trajectory is, or a story when a neighborhood goes at this for a while, what can be the outcome over the long term?
So every neighborhood is different, and the story is always a unique story to that neighborhood. In the West Core neighborhood, we've had, since its inception in 2009 or 10, I can't even remember exactly when we started, we've had 4 staff transitions. And today the board is pretty much self-supporting. We do have an ongoing grant from the City of Holland that supports our budget, but really we're an independent functioning organization. And the same is true for 360 and Heights of Hope. And it generally takes somewhere in the ballpark of 7 to 10 years from the first meeting of a group of volunteers in a neighborhood to the point where they're fully self-supporting. That would be a pretty typical trajectory. But within 3 years, very typically, a group can have their own connector up and functioning and getting started.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that input, Jay. Sergeant Weatherwax, I wonder if you'd care to share from your perspective. You've dipped into this a little bit, but just any other observations about how this work and neighborhoods getting stronger, how that impacts, or your perspective from the police force, how it impacts outcomes for neighborhoods?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And this is where I get really excited and passionate, because when I started 18 years ago, as a brand new officer, just getting my feet wet as in law enforcement, there were some of the aspects of the job that was intimidating, as anybody could imagine. And there was the one neighborhood that was really, really, I guess I want to say intimidating to me, was the Holland Heights area that now there's a neighborhood connector. So I think about that neighborhood then, I could think of a couple different Hollywood movies that I could compare it to, whether it's a high violent area, high gang, high drugs, whatever, high crime area. That was 18 years ago. And around that same time, and Jay, you might be able to have a date when Holland or the Heights of Hope was established. It was around the 2002, correct?
In Holland Heights, it would have been a little bit later than that, probably okay. 2005, 2006.
Okay, so a little bit later than I remembered, but anyway, to look at that community and where I got established in there as a community police officer, about 4 or 5 years on the force, I had an idea in my mind about what that community was. And that was, high crime area, high call volume for us. And at that time, as a new officer, it was. But once a neighborhood connector got established and they started the groundwork in building their team, to see where they've come over the last 15 to 18 years is absolutely remarkable. I was talking to somebody recently because they've got a Facebook page and they share information, and they're building a cookbook now as a community. They're making sure they're, as a community, they're getting out and shoveling the fire hydrants. Most recently, they had a cardboard sled race, because right across one of the streets here in Holland is at Admiralty Park, where there's a nice sledding hill. But they, as a community in the Holland Heights neighborhood that they focused on, they put together this sled race, and then that made other people want to join. So us as a law enforcement agency and on my community policing team, they did this, they spearheaded it, they put it together, and they got us to join. We weren't asked to join to be a part of it, but we wanted to be there because I've been able to see the transition of this community to go from a high crime area to a very low crime area, to an area of primarily rental properties that people used as transition in housing that they needed to live for a short period of time and then hopefully move out and have the desire to leave, to now people are living there and they have the desire to stay because of the relationships that's been built through this organization, through GLU's resources and efforts, and everything that's been established there has been amazing. So they've not only established this community and created the bonds and relationships and family atmosphere that they have now, but it's also creating a desirable place for people to live and raise kids and be a member of a neighborhood.
Yeah, that's encouraging to hear. I don't know, Jay, if you want to add a story. One thing I'm hearing is that neighborhoods can be producers of their own safety and their own security. I think, Jay, you've also witnessed in the Holland Heights, the neighborhood becoming producers of their own supporting their own children to succeed. Do you want to share something about that?
So when Heights of Hope had their first connector go through ABCD, she set up a basketball hoop in the one of the cul-de-sacs, and on Monday nights the guys would come out and play. On Tuesday nights the lady said, we want our turn, and something like that anyway. And she used those gatherings to listen. What do neighbors care about? Eventually they set up a little block connector network so that Stratford, Oxford, Abbey, I forget the fourth one, but they created the SOAR team, which meant there was one person from every block that was kind of the ears of each block. Wasn't long, and the SOAR member said, we need our own community center. So they rented an apartment in the neighborhood, and it was shut down because it wasn't zoned for anything except residential. So they as residents went to City Hall and sought a zoning variance and got it, and they had their first community center. It wasn't long after that, they said, what can we do to help our kids? And so they created a suite of youth programs. In fact, if you go to the Heights of Hope website, you can find for yourselves there quite a suite of youth-centered activities that run ongoing to this day. And then they said, we're one of the highest public busing neighborhoods in the city, and we don't have a shelter. We want our own shelter. So they went to the city, and the city said, we don't have money for a shelter. They went to Parks and Rec. We don't have money for, they went to the police. We don't have money for a shelter. Everybody said we don't have money. So finally they said, well, I guess we'll do it ourselves. And they started raising funds. And they got a certain way into their own fundraising. And then some donors came alongside and said, we're going to help you. And they now have their own bus shelter. And not once in the last 8 years has it been tagged. And they clean it up themselves and they take care of it. And then they said, more recently, they said, we want to buy one of these fourplexes ourselves. We'll use the upstairs rental from 2, and we'll turn the whole downstairs into a new community center. And that's what they did. So they're now owners. There's one young mom in the neighborhood who said, when I moved here, my only dream was to get out of this neighborhood, leave this neighborhood. Today, she's there on purpose. You couldn't move her out because she said, this neighborhood helped my kids succeed. Their generation was the first generation that actually graduated high school, almost 100%. And many of them went on to college. And she said, this neighborhood raised my kids. She said, I may be poor going forward. I may not get out of poverty per se, but you broke generational poverty by helping my kids succeed. And I think that's just so powerful.
Very powerful. Thank you, Jay. I just want to note briefly that we took a poll and 37% of those that took that poll said they have met one or two neighbors. 42% know their neighbors' names, and 21% feel very close to their neighbors. So that's just an interesting point of reference.
Yeah.
Amy, I'd like to come back to you. A common theme I've heard throughout is the idea of, this is neighborhood strengthening is born out of the dreams of the people that live there, that call that neighborhood home. And so I just wonder if you care to share, what are some of the kinds of dreams that you tend to hear in your neighborhood in West Core?
Yeah, so every year West Core hosts a listening event, and it's an event where neighbors can come together and brainstorm their ideas, the visions that they have for this neighborhood. And after that meeting, I sit with our employee, one of our Nuestra Casa coordinator, and we just think through, how can we put a committee around this? How can we make this come alive? This is what our neighborhood cares about and values. So yeah, some of the things that came from there were so amazing. And I'll just touch on two of the main ones that came up this year. One being being able to showcase neighborhood talent, such as art or music. And so having events that could bring people out to listen to a neighborhood band or put their artwork on display. And so that was a really cool idea that came out. And then another one was an alleyway cleanup and alleyway beautification. And not just to clean up the alley and make it look nice, but more so to have another venue for places to hold events. And so that would be a very cool project that we're looking to advance on, trying to put the foundational work on, getting people on the committee who are really invested in that project and would love to see it come to fruition. And one thing that came to fruition years ago actually was neighbors coming across a space that became available to them. It was actually a building that was abandoned, and this space they were dreaming up ideas of what they could do for it, and it developed into a neighborhood community building. And so through the efforts of the neighbors, they were able to gut this space out. They raised money to remodel it. They added a studio apartment on the second floor. And now it functions to this day as a community center that is a space for neighbors to be able to rent for birthday parties or I actually just spoke to somebody yesterday about having an art show. And so it's also available for book clubs or gardening mentorships, classes like cooking or yoga. And so, yeah, and out of that, we also host an event once a month for the neighbors to be able to get involved and get to know their neighbors, maybe meet new neighbors. Yeah, and so that building is called Nuestra Casa, and that, yeah, it's just been such a beautiful center of our community there.
That's wonderful.
Eric, if I could jump in really quick, I'm sorry. Something you said, Amy, just made me think about a couple different things that we've been able to do working with the neighborhood connectors. I remember years ago being in an apartment of some people that were really in need, and they had two small kids that didn't have beds. And through that interaction, and once I got through with the reason that I was there, I was able to make sure that I put them in contact with a neighborhood connector in that neighborhood. And through that connection, through that relationship, the neighborhood connector was able to come around to that family and give them the support they need, not only some emotional support to get through that time, that season in their life, but also the physical support. And they were able to get them beds and get them in contact because they were new to our area, and get them in contact with the other resources that we have available locally. So that really, really helped them. The other thing I wanted to share is because of the relationship that my team has got with their neighborhood communities, we've been able to use them as information sharing. And if you think of it kind of like a phone tree, I mean, I've been woke up at 2 a.m. To a phone call from a neighborhood connector saying, hey, Weather Wax, or most people call me Wax. Hey, Wax, I see a lot of police cars down the street. Is this anything that I need to put the word out to shelter in place? Can you find out what's going on? And so after a few phone calls, I'm able to call them back and say, nope, it's an isolated incident. It's just at that address. Your neighborhood is safe. Your community is safe. But in the retrospect, I've been able to do something like that. I've been able to call the neighborhood connector and say, hey, there's something going on down the street or in this neighborhood. Could you put the word out that it's isolated? There's no fear. You guys are safe to still be out of your houses, or shelter in place for the meantime. But it's just been a great resources for information sharing and to help direct people to get resources that are available.
That's wonderful. And Sergeant Weatherwax, I feel like you're illustrating an important point here, right? So Amy talks about the dreams that the residents have, and there's a dialogue across our country. Others may have questions about this with you, but just what is the right relationship between neighborhood and the police force, and even more broadly, an institution like the police force, but institutions broadly, right? And I feel like you found a way for an institution to bring its gifts to the story in a supportive fashion, and that's something unique. And I don't know if you care to reflect at all on community policing as a methodology.
Well, I think to speak nationwide would be pretty hard, but I know for us locally here in Holland, and maybe some of the neighbor agencies as well, I mean, we really focus on building relationships. We want the relationships with all the communities, and using GLU and the neighborhood connector philosophy, that's helped us, because we can kind of come into a neighborhood, or maybe meeting a family that could have had negative relationships with the police, whether it's somebody somewhere else that they lived that they had a negative run-in. We're able to use kind of a softer approach and get to know them on it over time, and show them that we're not there to simply enforce. We're there to build a relationship, and hopefully a positive relationship. And the neighborhood connector program in GLU is just such a great way to be able to get connected into the neighborhoods. Like I mentioned, their neighborhood, the West Fest last year. That was so great, because the officer that's assigned to that neighborhood, he's new to my community policing team. So for him to get out on a police mountain bike and just ride around the area and get to know the neighbors through that event was a great way to show them that he's there to support them, and he's there to build relationships. He's not there as just an enforcer.
Thank you for that. Well, I do want to save time for questions. We've got some amazing questions that have come in, and some that were from before. But maybe we could do a lightning round. I'd love to just go around, maybe starting with Jay, and then Amy, and then Sergeant Weatherwax. There's lots of ways people could get involved in their neighborhood, could get involved with Great Lakes Urban, and it could be from some volunteer support in the neighborhood, like you're doing as a volunteer block connector, Jay. It could be financial support. It could be through other means as well, liking us on Facebook and all those different means. But I just wonder, why should someone consider supporting their neighborhood and or Great Lakes Urban? Jay?
So I'm going to just make this personally. Why do I find it so helpful and important? I don't think we've ever, as a nation, been in an environment where isolation is as high as it is today. That is, if you take out a tic-tac-toe board, 9 squares, and you put your residence at the center, and if you ask the typical North American, how many of your neighbors who live immediately around you and the other 8 squares around you, how many of their first and last names can you give? Often it's not even 1 or maybe 2. Today, this idea of a village raising a child used to be pretty central. It used to be the way we did society. Today it's not. And so in the whole helping infrastructure, the whole social change framework, the one thing that is missing in almost all of our neighborhoods is this connectivity, this being connected to each other and believing that we have, by working together, all the capacities we need to achieve what we want, what we dream about together. It's within our grasp. We don't have to be afraid. We can work together to have a beautiful future together. That's what inspires me.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, for me, there are so many people who want to connect and who want to be a part of something so special and memorable, especially during this COVID time, as Jay mentioned. I mean, where everyone is more isolated than ever. So investing into Great Lakes Urban can really help continue to perpetuate this growth and development in the neighborhood. I truly believe that we all need each other, whether that's emotionally or in other forms. Creating an avenue to build that bridge can only inspire others to get excited and join in and be a part of a dream for their neighborhood. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll kind of follow Jay's lead if I have a license to do so. And kind of on a personal note, I grew up in a broken home in an impoverished neighborhood, and joining the military right out of high school, and kind of getting out of that, and now here in Holland and seeing this philosophy work, seeing it firsthand, coming from the neighborhood, from a high crime kind of a dark, dingy feeling neighborhood to what it is now. It's a bright spot in our community. I see this program working, and it's turning neighborhoods into communities, building relationships, not only within that a few block area, but it's bringing people in. Once it's established and that success is there, it becomes a magnet for other people and organizations to want to be around that. I mentioned the sledding hill and the sledding event that they had recently, and people wanted to be there. They wanted to be with them because they're a bright spot in our community now. So it's wonderful to see what these neighborhood connectors are doing and the success that they're having. And it's through the seed that's planted from GLU and getting started in these communities. So it's great to be a part of that. It's great to be a part of the city team now, myself, and I'm really, really excited about the future for GLU and the future for their work in the Holland area.
Wonderful. We're going to turn things over now to some questions that have come in, and thank you for sharing those. I do want to say that we may not get to all the questions that have been asked, in which case, again, we're going to try to follow up with an email following this event, so that you can have this to look back on. To our panelists, I want to say that don't feel like you have to answer the questions. We can, if you don't feel that that's something you can address, it's not a problem. But one that's come in asks, how can we as neighbors get better at connecting with each other, even without being official block connectors?
Go ahead, Amy.
Okay, I was wondering, I'm like, should I go? Yeah, I think one of the biggest ways to just start somewhere is to start with a simple hello. Just even getting to know who's on your block. I think that is a key to, again, building the relationships. I feel like relationships are at the center of everything. And so in order for people to want to join or want to be a part of something like this, knowing people who already are doing it is the key. And so where they can hear your heart and passion about the neighborhood, and where they can not just hear what you know, but more so hear how much you care, and how much you care about them. So yeah, I would say the initial is just starting with that hello.
Yeah, I think in following up on that, having some curiosity. I love scavenger hunts, and I want to discover what are some of the amazing gifts that are present on my block and in my among my neighbors. And if we could share with each other, what could we do, building on what each one of us has. So one of my neighbors, for example, has a double lot, and they've turned half of their backyard into a community garden space. And they have some chickens and other things. And we often host our block parties in their yard. We had one summer where we met, I think, 6, 8 times during the summer, most often in their yard because they had the space. And I have another elderly Latina on my block who makes the best salsa in the world, and it gives her great joy in providing it at each one of our parties. And I could just go down the street and name different gifts, different things that each person brings. So go on a journey to discover the wonderful things, the wonderful gifts that are already present on your block. I can tell you, God's already there, and in abundance, and there's a lot to work with. I don't pick your spot. I can tell you that's true.
And I'll just add really quick, something that's very simple that my wife and I have started doing more and more is, I think over the last 15, 20 years, everybody wanted these safe, secluded spaces in their backyard, vegetation all around and a fire pit, so they can sit in quiet and peace. But we need to move to the front of our houses a little bit more, sit on our front porches, drink a cup of coffee, say hi to your neighbors as they're walking by on the sidewalk. So
Yeah.
we've really gravitated to our front porch more, and that's where we hang out now. So we can see our neighbors walking by and say hi and make sure that we were able to just make eye contact and like Amy said, say hello. And that's really important, just that initial connection.
Wonderful ideas. Appreciate that. We've had some conversation in the chat box around the relationship with churches and neighborhoods. Let me ask this to you all. How is doing communicating community development this way different from or better than a church or churches in a neighborhood doing community outreach, especially since churches supply finances for the community groups?
So it's pretty rare in North America to find a church who says the condition of the neighborhood is as important to us as the rest of stuff that we do at church. It's pretty rare. Most often, churches are focused on membership and the things that members want to do and care about. And if they go out in the community, it's often to either reach out or do something for somebody else. And that's very different than doing things with neighbors. One of the beautiful things we discover through this connecting program is Amy invites neighbors to come around, for example, a hoarder. I can tell you that probably 4 out of 5 of the volunteers will be people who are members in various churches around or near the neighborhood. But if she had gone to the church, she wouldn't have found those same 5 volunteers. It almost takes a neutral party to invite the participation from the churches in this kind of community development work.
I also think, we partner with different organizations in the area as well as churches too. So there are a lot of projects that we partner with churches on, as well as events that we partner with. And so working together to accomplish a goal for, the overall well-being of the neighborhood has been just incredible to be a part of as well. So.
If you walk into a church, it's pretty rare to see the map of the neighborhood they occupy on the wall. But if you walk into any one of these community organizations, the very first thing that just about that hits you in the face is the map that they are attending to. They put the condition of the neighborhood itself, front and center. They exist to help neighbors create a better future together. And that's just a different agenda than most churches have today.
Mhm. Yeah, and I feel churches are focused a lot on the betterment of your spiritual growth, the betterment of your personal growth. Um, and I myself am a church goer, so I totally stand behind that. But yeah, just a different outlook on what we're trying to achieve, as well as personal growth, as well as like, developing relationships. So
What I like to see too is when you have these neighborhood connectors, everybody that's involved in that, they live right there. You have a lot of these churches that are well attended, but not everybody that attends that church in that neighborhood lives in that neighborhood. But neighborhood connector and the group that Amy has, or Heights of Hope, or the other groups, everybody that's invested, they live there. They've got buy-in, they've got the community, and the connection is right there where they live.
Great, thank you all. Another question that came up, it has to do kind of with the scope of this, right? So approximately how many community connectors are there in Holland, in Michigan, and the US?
Well, I know in Holland, there are 4 established. There's a 5th one that's just being incubated, and there's already talk about a 6th one. In the Grand Rapids area, in Wyoming, there's for sure one. There might be a 2nd one, not associated so much with Great Lakes Urban. In Grand Rapids itself, we have a partnership there with Wayne Squires at Bates Place. And they're nurturing leaders in for sure 5 neighborhoods right now. And that's an ongoing and growing story as well. At one time when I worked with World Renew, I was personally in relationship with leaders in 130 urban neighborhoods nationwide. So that gives you a little bit of the sense of scope. And many of them are really interested to come into this glue network that we're just beginning to incubate.
Very good. And let's take one more question here. Have you encountered resistance from neighborhoods when adopting the ABCD approach? If so, how do you convince these communities it's worth it?
So I don't know about you, Amy. Locally, are individuals resistant? Have you found any individual resistance?
honestly, I feel like because asset-based development is so personable and I say this redundantly, but it's because it's the core of what it is relationship building, that you don't get a whole lot of resistance. I don't think they're knowing like that's, oh, you're trying the ABCD approach on me, but yeah, I don't get a lot of resistance. I do notice there are people who would like to stay more secluded or aren't really an engager into events or anything like that, and that's totally understandable, and we respect their boundaries with that. I have a neighbor on my block who during the COVID season wanted nobody to stop at their house, nobody to knock and talk to them, because they just were trying to keep things safe. They're not trying to get to know people, but they're definitely wanting to keep everyone safe, and as well as themselves. Totally respected that. And so during Christmas, I just left a little goodie bag with a Christmas card and just left it on their doorstep and said, hey, I still know you're here. I'm thinking of you and hope you have a great holiday season. So it's little things like that where they know that they are still cared about, but also respected in their boundaries. So
There's usually a reason why somebody does not join or want to participate. So for example, I have a neighbor on my block. He's a former ex-con. He's an ex-con. He did some time in jail. When he came back into the neighborhood, he really was afraid of being labeled and being isolated, and he had a lot of really well-founded fears about being recognized. He didn't want to be on any email list. He didn't want to be invited. He didn't want, long story short, 7 years later, they ended up buying the house that they rented for 4 years because they were so welcomed, so loved by their neighbors. And today, in fact, 2 weeks ago, another neighbor passed away real suddenly in his early 50s. And it was this neighbor, this ex-con, who was in relationship and let the rest of us know so that we could be part of expressing our condolences and come alongside this lady and her children in their time of mourning.
So I want to thank our panelists. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our Lunch and Learn. And so I want to thank you again. And I know on behalf of those that attended, a huge debt of gratitude for the work that you're doing, nurturing that Holland story and beyond. There was a question about cost, what does it cost to have a connector in place? And that's going to depend on every neighborhood context, but that feels like maybe a good place to end this, is to say, we hope that you've come from this feeling encouraged, that there's hope of rebuilding the fabric of communities and strengthening neighborhoods. And there's proof that we see today. It might be that you want to get involved in your own neighborhood and be part of the strengthening neighborhood story where you live. And it might be that you want to support the strengthening neighborhood work that Great Lakes Urban is doing. I wanted to say to those in that latter category that, your support does make a difference. And several of you on here today have probably been supporters of Great Lakes Urban. These stories do not happen without that kind of support, and that's an encouragement to us to keep doing the work. I want to make a commitment that if you do give, whether it's $25, whether it's $100, or whether it's through your volunteer support and getting the word out about Great Lakes Urban and the work, whatever that is, it's going to make a difference. And our commitment is, we want to focus, our heart really is with neighborhoods that have a legacy of not being fully resourced. There may be evidence of distress, and that's where we're going to invest your money if you donate to us. There are ways to give, and you can always send a check to Great Lakes Urban, and we'll share that slide here in a second. You can also go to our website, and we'll get that posted and emailed to you as well. But the website, you can safely and securely give to donate through the website as well. So there are different options, different ways to do that. But our commitment is to stretch every single funding that comes in. I think in this case, at times like these, I think about a quote that comes from the father of time banking and other social innovations. And he said, a healthy, strong neighborhood and community runs like a Prius, runs like a vehicle like that. You need just a thin stream of fuel to ignite the engine, and then from there, it's that big stream of what he calls psychic energy. That's the goodwill that people have toward each other and the dreams that they have for a better future for themselves and their children. But you do need that thin stream of fuel to get the process starting in an engine like a Prius, and that communities function like that as well. And just know that we will stretch everything that you would consider giving to us to have that highest impact possible in creating the engine for change in strengthening neighborhoods and communities. So with that, we are at the end of our time. Unless there's anything else from our panelists that you would like to share from the heart of Great Lakes Urban, we just thank you all for being here, and we hope you go away being encouraged. Anything else from our panelists just in the last minute?
Just say thank you.
The opportunity to share.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming out, and also the opportunity to share with you guys as well.
Wonderful. We're truly grateful, and with that, this will conclude our Lunch and Learn. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you again for coming.